Today we're tackling something really fascinating. We're not just solving a mystery, although we are doing that too. We're actually looking at the kind of thinking, the cognitive failures that allow mysteries like this to even exist.
Exactly. And our case study is a real classic, the locked room puzzle, specifically the baffling death of Mr. Samuel Grant. And of course, the involvement of the only person who could possibly figure it out, the fugitive barrister.
Right. So our mission here is to really dissect how investigations work, or maybe how they don't work sometimes. We want to get past the initial shock of the crime scene itself.
And focus instead on the details, the really tiny, granular things that the police, in this case, well, they kind of got blinded by their own assumptions, didn't they? They just ignored certain things.
Yeah, they did. So this deep dive, it's kind of a shortcut for you, the listener, to understand the power of really looking. Superior observation, you could call it.
We're digging into how these seemingly impossible situations, like a murder in a sealed room, often hinge on just one simple, overlooked contradiction.
We're going beyond just what happened in that sealed room. We're focusing on the psychology behind it, the staging. How is the illusion, this impossible scenario, actually manufactured?
And how could one person, the barrister, look at the exact same facts, the same room, the same body as everyone else?
And see something completely different, a whole different reality.
Precisely. It's the ultimate illusion, isn't it? A physical one. A murder that seems to just break the laws of physics because, well, how else could the killer get out? They must have vanished.
For the police, that locked door was the answer. It proved suicide.
But for the barrister, that locked door wasn't the answer at all. It was just the first question, the starting point.
Okay, so let's paint the picture. We're in London. It's one of those, miserable evenings, cold, bit of mist swirling around. Mayfair, Chesterfield Street specifically.
Yeah, think high Victorian architecture. Solid buildings, very exclusive. They're designed, really, to keep the world out, keep things private.
The perfect setting for quiet wealth. And maybe the perfect setting for a crime where secrecy is absolutely vital.
And that's the scene. A man, Samuel Grant, is found dead in his private study. And the initial reports, they just don't add up at all.
So imagine walking into this large Victorian townhouse. You get to the study, and the room itself immediately tells you something about the victim, Samuel Grant. His position, his intent.
Definitely. This wasn't just an office. It felt like a sanctuary, a private space.
And the environment suggests he valued that privacy, almost isolation maybe. The room is just built to be sealed off.
You've got that big, heavy mahogany desk. It's almost like a barrier itself, positioned near the window. And then there's that detail about the carpet.
Ah, yes. The thick carpet. You mentioned that earlier.
It's not just about it being plush or expensive. Think about the acoustics.
Right. It muffles sound. So if there's a struggle
Or a gunshot, exactly. In these old, solid houses, sound doesn't always travel well anyway, but a really thick carpet like that, it acts as a damper.
it would significantly muffle any loud noise, maybe prevent the staff or neighbors from hearing anything immediately.
It reinforces that whole idea of a private, controlled space designed to exclude the outside world, which, ironically, makes it the perfect soundstage for a murder that needs to be kept quiet.
And this feeling of absolute control, this sealed environment, that's what really trapped Inspector Collins and his team, wasn't it?
It absolutely was. They looked at the facts, the physical facts of the room, and they pointed overwhelmingly in one direction. It kind of overrode any other instinct they might have had.
So they went with the simplest explanation, the path of least resistance.
Suicide. It's often the default when things look this contained.
Okay, let's lay out those facts. The ones that made suicide seem so, well, logical.
First, the victim himself, Mr. Grant, slumped over his desk. Seems straightforward.
Then the weapon. A small revolver found right beside his hand.
Again, seems simple. Suggests he was holding it, used it, and it dropped right there.
But here's the real clincher for the police. The thing that cemented the suicide theory, the triple lock scenario, as you called it.
Right. First, the door. The only door into the study. Locked. Crucially, locked from the inside.
That alone is a huge barrier. If the bolt's thrown from the inside, how could anyone have left the room after locking it?
But it gets even more complex, because the key, the actual physical key needed to unlock that door,
Where was it found?
in the victim's pocket.
Wow. Okay. Think about what that implies. The key being in his pocket.
It seems to negate every possible way someone else could have sealed the room. A killer might lock it from outside and take the key, or maybe rig something up and leave the key in the lock on the inside.
But for the key to end up in the victim's pocket, it suggests Grant locked the door himself, completed the act, and then put the key away. It just screams self-containment. No external involvement possible.
And then you add the final pieces, the window, shut, latched securely from the inside as well.
Any sign of forced entry, pry marks, broken glass, anything.
Absolutely nothing. Zero evidence of any kind of forced entry or manipulation on the door, the frame, the window, the lock. It was, for all intents and purposes, hermetically sealed.
So the police logic, purely based on the physical setup, the geometry of the room.
Was completely sound. From what they could see, entry and exit by another party were physically impossible.
It's like the perfect setup for confirmation bias, isn't it? The physical reality, the locked door, the key in the pocket, it just overrides everything else.
Any doubts about, say, why a wealthy man might do this, or maybe the scene looking a little too neat? All that gets pushed aside.
The police had their explanation. They reconciled the body with the environment. Case closed. Suicide.
And that point right there is where the real thinking, the rigorous analysis, has to start. The police saw the outside, the sealed envelope of the room, and they just stopped.
They assumed everything inside must match the outside.
But the barrister, he understands something crucial about staged crimes. The structure of the room itself, the very thing that seems to prove the conclusion, might actually be the killer's main tool, designed specifically to mislead.
So this is where it gets really interesting. Because if the room is sealed shut, if the key is literally in the dead man's pocket, how on earth could anyone else have been involved?
That's the challenge. That's the focus for us today. We have to deconstruct that perfect physical impossibility. We need to find the tiny crack in that seemingly airtight logic.
Because if we can prove it wasn't suicide, despite the locked room,
then the entire structure, the whole illusion of impossibility just collapses.
And often, the killer's mistake isn't in the grand design, the mechanics of the trick.
No, it's usually in overlooking something small. Something biological, maybe, or behavioral. Something they just couldn't control or didn't think mattered.
Okay, so the fugitive barrister arrives on the scene. And right away, his approach is totally different from the police.
Completely. He doesn't immediately zero in on the obvious things like the locked door or even the body itself.
No, the source material describes him doing this silence scan. He's treating the room like a puzzle box, maybe, not just a crime scene.
He takes his time, he absorbs the whole environment. Where exactly is the desk placed? Is there dust on the bookshelves? How thick is that rug we talked about?
And, crucially, it mentions his eyes pause, just for a moment, on the air vent near the floor.
He's gathering baseline data. He's trying to understand what belongs in this room, what's normal for this space, so that anything out of place, anything that doesn't fit, will immediately jump out at him.
It's methodical, objective, like a true analyst. He gets that the police got tunnel vision on the door and the window.
Right, and because of that, they potentially ignored every other fixture, every other detail in the room.
But the first really critical clue he spots, the one that completely shatters the police's suicide theory. It's undeniable. And it's right there, with the victim.
Yes, this is the handedness contradiction. It's a forensic detail, really, rooted in basic biomechanics. And it's something the killer clearly didn't account for.
So what exactly did he notice?
Two things that just don't add up together. First, the gun is found lying on the victim's right side. Okay, seems plausible. Yet the small, fatal burn mark is visible on the left temple.
Left temple wound, gun on the right side, and Inspector Collins confirms Grant was
Decidedly right-handed.
Okay, let's break that down. Why is that detail, the handedness, absolute proof of murder?
Well, think about the mechanics of suicide by firearm. It's usually a very fast, almost reflexive action. The body's immediate reaction is dominated by the shock, the trauma, and the involuntary muscle spasms, especially in the dominant hand holding the weapon.
So if you're right-handed, the most natural, the easiest way to shoot yourself is using that dominant right hand. You'd probably place the barrel against your right temple, maybe under the chin, or even in the mouth. That's the most common.
Could a right-handed person shoot themselves in the left temple? They could, but it's awkward. You'd have to cross your dominant hand all the way over your body. It's mechanically difficult and less instinctive.
Okay, but let's say he did manage that awkward position. He fires with his right hand at his left temple. What happens to the gun?
Physics takes over. There's recoil. There's immediate, massive physiological trauma. The body collapses. The muscles in the right hand would spasm, likely violently.
So where would the gun probably end up?
Most likely, it would either remain clutched near the left side of the head or chest where the impact occurred, or maybe it would drop straight down, perhaps under the desk as the arm goes limp.
So for the gun to be found lying neatly on the victim's right side, the opposite side from the wound, across the body from the hand that supposedly pulled the trigger.
It's almost physically impossible under the chaotic conditions of a self-inflicted gunshot. It just doesn't happen like that naturally.
What does that placement suggest then?
It screams staging. It strongly suggests someone else was involved. Perhaps the killer forced Grant to shoot himself, maybe holding his hand, or shot him themselves, and then after the fact, they deliberately placed the gun on the right side.
Why? Why put it there?
Maybe hoping it would look like a natural drop from the dominant hand, reinforcing the suicide idea. It's an oversight, really. Born from maybe haste, or just assuming the police wouldn't look that closely at the forensic details.
The killer was banking on the locked room, being so convincing that these smaller inconsistencies wouldn't matter.
Exactly. But this one single observation, the mismatch between the wound, the handedness, and the gun's final resting place, it was the linchpin.
It immediately flips the script. It goes from impossible suicide to definitely a staged murder, regardless of the locked door.
Right. The physical evidence on the body proves someone else had to be in that room, which means the locked room itself, it must be an illusion. It has to be solvable.
So once murder is established, the focus shifts, doesn't it? It's less about the room's geometry and more about the victim's psychology, the motive.
Precisely. The police had assumed despair was the driving force. But the barrister starts looking for evidence of something else, duress, external pressure.
And he finds it pretty quickly, that half-written letter on the desk, addressed to his wife, Eleanor Grant.
Yes, and the text just stops cold. Eleanor, forgive me for...
Just like that, mid-sentence.
Mid-sentence, mid-thought. That abrupt stop is incredibly significant.
How so?
Think about a typical suicide note. It's usually a final statement, right? An attempt to explain, to put a period on things. It's considered finished.
But this feels interrupted.
Exactly. It looks like Grant was in the middle of writing about something difficult, maybe the anxiety he was feeling, maybe a decision he was forced into, or even the threat he was under, and something or someone stopped him, cut off his final words.
It's like a snapshot of vulnerability turning instantly into violence.
And this lines up perfectly with what his wife, Eleanor Grant, told the investigators.
What did she say?
She testified that her husband had been acting incredibly anxious for days. He was convinced he was being followed. And crucially, she mentioned he felt threatened, specifically over a business deal that had gone sour.
Okay, so that paints a completely different picture. Intense external pressure, not quiet internal despair.
Absolutely. You've got the unfinished letter suggesting interruption, and the wife's testimony confirming a state of anxiety and external threats. It provides the psychological context for murder.
And the handedness contradiction provides the physical proof.
They work together. The physical evidence makes the psychological evidence suddenly very credible.
It also tells us something about the police mindset, doesn't it? They probably heard Eleanor's testimony.
And likely dismissed it. Chalked it up to a grieving wife, unable to accept the reality of suicide. It's common.
But the barrister hears it and sees it as essential context. He gives weight to that unfinished letter. It connects the dots.
Because the locked room didn't automatically rule out murder for him, he kept an open mind.
So the barrister has established it's murder, and there's evidence of threats. He pushes Eleanor Grant on the specifics of those threats.
And she gives him a name that immediately causes a flicker of recognition in the barrister, Victor Kane.
How do we know he recognized the name?
It's subtle. The source material notes his reaction wasn't surprise, but a slight narrowing of his eyes. He repeats the name softly, Victor Kane. It indicates he already knows of this person.
So Kane isn't just some random name. He's likely someone known in certain circles.
Probably the same high-stakes circles, finance, law, tricky business deals that the barrister himself navigated before his change in circumstances. It suggests Kane has a reputation, possibly not a good one.
And the police, presumably prompted by the barrister, start digging into Victor Kane. What do they find?
They find the motive. Clear as day, Kane wasn't just some disgruntled associate. He was Samuel Grant's ex-business partner.
Ah, okay. That changes things.
And it gets worse. Kane had previously been caught red-handed embezzling a significant amount of money from Grant's firm.
Embezzlement. That's serious. So this isn't a new conflict.
No, it's rooted in deep financial betrayal and potentially revenge or desperation. Grant likely held information that could completely ruin Kane. Maybe there was new evidence. Maybe Grant was about to go to the authorities.
Which might be exactly what he was trying to write about in that letter to Eleanor. Forgive me for the ruin he was about to bring on his former partner. Or forgive me for getting involved with him in the first place.
It's plausible. The motive is suddenly crystal clear. This wasn't just about money Kane owed. It was about silencing Grant to prevent exposure, prison, total destruction.
The threats Eleanor mentioned now make perfect sense. Kane wasn't just arguing. He was fighting for his survival, professionally and maybe even legally.
So if we piece this together, a narrative starts to form, doesn't it? Kane didn't just show up hoping for a chat.
No, he came prepared. The fact that he was willing to breach Grant's private sanctuary, his study,
It suggests extreme desperation. He wasn't planning a discussion. He was planning to eliminate the threat Grant and then stage the scene meticulously to point away from himself.
and that level of planning absolutely requires a foolproof escape. An alibi built entirely on the illusion of impossibility created by that locked room.
But let's pause here. If Eleanor named Kane and the motive was this strong embezzlement, prior conflict, why didn't the police immediately suspect him, even with the locked room?
That's a good question. Why stick so rigidly to suicide?
It comes back to that hierarchy of evidence they operated under. Physical evidence, the hard facts of the scene, the locked door, the key in the pocket, trumped everything else.
So testimonial evidence, like what Eleanor said, especially coming from someone they might see as emotionally compromised.
It just didn't carry the same weight. For Inspector Collins, the sheer physical impossibility of anyone else getting out of that room made Kane's motive, however strong, completely irrelevant at that point.
The killer's best defense was the police's own logical framework. It blinded them.
Exactly. So the barrister's task wasn't just finding the killer. It was dismantling the very logic that was protecting the killer.
Which brings us directly to how he did that. How did he solve the riddle of the sealed room? The mechanism of escape. Okay, so the barrister knows it's murder. He knows Kane is the likely killer with a strong motive, but he's still faced with that one massive problem. The locked room. The physical impossibility.
Right. So he goes back to the physical space, he's paced the room, observed the main features, and then the source says he stops. Crouches down. Near the air vent, the one he briefly noted during his initial scan.
This is the moment, isn't it? The shift from the obvious to the overlooked.
Absolutely. The police were focused on the big things, door, window, the lock itself, things at eye level, things associated with normal entry and exit.
But the barrister looks lower. He focuses on the mundane, the parts of the architecture people just ignore, like an air vent cover.
Because it's often in those ignored details, the small, static things that the truth is hiding.
And he finds something. The clue of neglect, as the source calls it.
Faint, but definitely fresh. Scratches around the screws holding the metal vent cover to the wall.
Fresh scratches. Why is it so significant? And why did the police miss them?
Well, they're significant because fresh means recent manipulation. Someone fiddled with this vent cover very recently. The police likely missed them because, one, they probably weren't looking down there with any real focus.
They weren't expecting an entry point via an air vent.
Exactly. And two, faint scratches on old hardware. It's easy to just dismiss that. You'd think, oh, that's just wear and tear, or maybe from cleaning staff over the years, or past maintenance work.
But the barrister, already convinced it's a staged murder,
Sees those fresh scratches and knows immediately. This is not random damage. This is evidence of deliberate action, manipulation.
So what does he do?
He does what the police clearly hadn't bothered to do. He carefully removes the screws, noting the freshness of the disturbance around them, and takes off the vent cover.
And inside the vent passage.
He finds two critical items. Items that completely confirm Kane's premeditation.
What are they?
First, a thin piece of strong wire. The kind often associated with bypassing simple locks or manipulating mechanisms.
Okay. Lock-picking tools, essentially.
And second, something even more damning, a small glass vial clearly labeled chloroform.
Chloroform, wow. Okay, that changes everything. You don't just carry chloroform around for everyday purposes.
Absolutely not. Nobody brings incapacitating agents and lock manipulation tools to a casual meeting or even a heated argument. This proves the entire visit was planned, calculated.
So Kane came prepared to subdue Grant, or maybe just to ensure a quiet entry or exit.
Both are possible. The chloroform suggests he might have planned to incapacitate Grant, maybe to search for documents or force him to do something. The wire suggests he planned to bypass security quietly. Either way, it confirms this wasn't some spontaneous act of violence. It was cold and calculated.
And that thin wire found inside the vent. What does that specific placement suggest?
It likely points to how Kane got into the house, or maybe the study itself initially, quietly picking a lock somewhere else, maybe a back door or window, then making his way to the study before Grant arrived and locked himself in for the evening.
So Kane might have actually been hiding inside that vent passage, waiting.
It seems likely. Which implies an incredible amount of nerve, patience, and cold-blooded calculation. He had to wait there, silently, until Grant came in, locked the door, and settled down, effectively sealing himself in with his killer.
Okay, so we have the method of entry or hiding, and we have confirmation of premeditation. Now the barrister puts it all together. He reconstructs the entire sequence, including the ingenious multi-step illusion of the locked room escape.
Right, this is the breakdown of how Kane seemingly defied physics. We have to appreciate the twisted brilliance of the plan, while also seeing how the barrister picked it apart logically.
Let's go through it step by step. Phase 1, entry and hiding.
Kane uses his tools, maybe that thin wire, to get into the house undetected. He gets to the study before Grant. He removes the vent cover, leaving those tiny, fresh scratches, and somehow squeezes into the ductwork or passage behind it.
Which, in a big old Victorian house like that, might have been larger than we think. Space for pipes? Wiring?
Possibly. Enough for a determined man to conceal himself. Then Grant comes in, does his usual routine, locks the main study door firmly from the inside.
And unknowingly seals his own fate. He's trapped inside with Kane hiding just feet away.
Phase 2, the murder. At the opportune moment, maybe when Grant is distracted writing that letter, Kane emerges. The confrontation happens. It must have startled Grant immensely.
And the murder itself. Using Grant's own gun, remember?
Crucial for the staging. Then the key mistake. Placing the gun on the wrong side, the right side, hoping to mimic a natural fall but failing to account for the handedness and the wound location. He was betting heavily on the police, overlooking that biomechanical detail.
Okay, Grant is dead. The scene is partially staged. Now comes the truly difficult part. Phase 3, the ultimate escape trick. How does Kane get out of a room locked from the inside?
This is the technical core of the illusion. He didn't use the vent to escape. That was likely just for entry or hiding. He used the door.
But the door was locked from the inside.
Yes, but he manipulated it after the murder. He likely left the door not quite fully shut, maybe just opened a tiny crack, a fraction of an inch. Enough for a gap.
A gap? For what?
For another tool. Not the thin wire found in the vent. This would have to be something different. A long wire, or maybe a flexible cord or raw assembly, something much longer, probably stronger, and definitely specialized.
Okay, a long wire. What does he do with it?
Think about it. He's now outside the study with the door almost closed but unlocked. The key is still in the lock on the inside. He needs to lock that door from the outside, but leave the key inside.
Oh.
He threads this long, flexible wire through that tiny gap between the door and the frame. The wire needs some kind of hook or loop or grabber mechanism on the end.
To reach the key.
To reach the key that's still sitting in the keyhole on the inside of the door, he has to manipulate the wire from the outside to engage the key.
And then turn it through the gap.
Exactly. He has to have enough control and leverage with this long, thin tool working through a tiny crack to physically turn the key in the lock mechanism from the outside, engaging the bolt and securely locking the door.
Wow, that sounds incredibly difficult. It requires specialized knowledge, immense dexterity, and nerves of steel. He's doing this right after committing a murder.
Extreme, calculated finesse under immense pressure. It's audacious. So now the door is locked from the inside, but the key is still in the lock, and his tool is still threaded through the gap.
So he just pulls the wire out.
He retracts the long wire tool, yes. But here's the next problem for the illusion. If he just pulls the wire free, the key, which was being held by the wire, would likely just fall straight down onto the floor inside the room.
And a key just lying on the floor inside a locked room. That looks suspicious.
Yeah.
It proves external manipulation.
Precisely. The illusion demands that the key ends up somewhere natural for a suicide victim.
In his pocket, where it was found.
Exactly. Which leads us to the final and perhaps most incredibly risky part of the plan. Phase 4, the final illusory seal.
He's got the door locked. He's pulled his long wire tool back out through the gap. But the key is now presumably sitting on the floor just inside the door.
Or maybe he managed to keep hold of it with a wire tool as he withdrew it. The source isn't explicit on that exact microstep, but the outcome is the same. He now has the key effectively outside the locked room, or at least under his control via the wire through the gap.
And he needs to get it into Grant's pocket.
Yes.
From outside the room.
Yes, this is where the audacity level goes off the charts. He can't just drop it near the body again, might look suspicious. How did the key get from the lock to the floor? The suicide narrative requires the key to have been put away by Grant before the final act.
So the pocket placement is crucial to making the whole locked from the inside story hold up.
Absolutely critical. He has to somehow use that wire tool again, maybe maneuvering it through the gap under the door this time or back through the crack near the lock to carefully guide the key across the floor towards the body.
Grant is slumped over the desk, right?
Right, which might have actually helped Kane slightly, maybe created a fold or opening in the clothing. Kane has to use the wire with almost surgical precision to nudge, lift, and guide that key into Grant's pocket.
The risk is immense. What if he misses? What if the key clatters loudly on a floorboard, even under the carpet?
If the key ends up anywhere but the pocket, the illusion is weakened. An astute investigator, someone like the barrister, would immediately question how a key used to lock the door from the inside ended up, say, under the chair instead of still in the lock or clutched in the victim's hand or neatly in his pocket.
So the pocket placement was the final flourish, designed to definitively say, Grant locked himself in. The key never left his possession after that.
Kane was betting everything on that. Betting that the police would find the key in the pocket, confirm the door was locked from inside, and just accept the conclusion without ever questioning the physics or the complex sequence required to achieve that state.
He sealed the room, slipped away with his tools, leaving behind only those nearly invisible scratches on a vent cover nobody was likely to check.
A plan built on mechanical ingenuity and a cynical assessment of standard police procedure.
Okay, so the barrister has figured it out. He's reconstructed this incredibly complex sequence of events, but a theory is one thing, proving it is another.
Right. He needs to provide Inspector Collins with concrete evidence. He lays out the logical chain, showing how his analysis is backed up by hard facts discovered because of his deductions.
And the evidence they find is pretty damning for Kane.
Devastatingly so. First, the fingerprints. Remember those fresh scratches on the vent cover and screws?
Yes.
Forensics lifts prints from those disturbed areas, and they get a match. Victor Kane.
Boom. That puts Kane physically at the vent, manipulating it recently.
Exactly. And spurred by that irrefutable link, the police move fast. They arrest Kane. And a search of his flat turns up the rest of the puzzle pieces.
What do they find there?
They find the matching tools. The remainder of the chloroform, likely from the same batch as the vial found in the vent. And critically, a distinct set of professional-grade lockpicking and manipulation tools, likely including the thin wire and the specialized long wire assembly needed for the door trick.
So it all connects. The vent scratches, initially dismissed as nothing,
Lead directly to Kane's fingerprints, which lead to his arrest, which leads to the discovery of the tools and the chloroform, confirming premeditation. And Kane's history already provided the clear motive.
The whole complex illusion, the circular logic the police were trapped in, it's completely dismantled by the barrister's linear, step-by-step observation and deduction.
And this is where we circle back to the core lesson of this whole deep dive. The principle that's really valuable for you, the listener, to take away. It's this fundamental difference between just seeing something and actively noticing it.
Can you expand on that? Seeing versus noticing.
Well, the police saw the big picture elements. They saw the body, they saw the gun nearby, they saw the door locked from the inside. Their vision was broad, but it was kind of shallow. They saw the scene that fit the pre-existing narrative of suicide.
Okay, they saw what they expected to see.
Pretty much. But the barrister noticed the details that actively contradicted that narrative. He noticed the physiological impossibility of the gun's placement relative to the wound and the victim's handedness. He noticed the unnatural abruptness of the unfinished letter. And crucially, he noticed those faint, fresh scratches on the vent screws, tiny details that screamed, something is wrong here.
His vision was more granular, more critical. He was looking for the anomalies.
Exactly. And that difference is huge. Why do we, as humans, tend to ignore contradictions sometimes? Why did the police gloss over those details?
Cognitive bias. Confirmation bias.
That's a huge part of it. Cognitive convenience. Once the police formed their initial hypothesis, suicide, based on the very strong evidence of the locked door, their brains effectively created a filter.
So anything supporting suicide got amplified.
Right. The gun near the hand, the sense of confinement, those details were given maximum weight. But anything that contradicted the suicide theory,
Like the handedness issue or the scratches.
those details got minimized, rationalized away as unimportant noise, measurement error, or just not properly registered as relevant data points at all. Ignored.
It's easier, isn't it?
Yeah.
Mentally easier to accept this seemingly obvious conclusion than to start the hard work of proving a physical impossibility actually happened.
Takes far less intellectual energy. The barrister, though, starts differently. He operates from a clean slate mentally. He gives potentially equal weight to every detail he observes. That massive, solid mahogany door is initially no more or less important than one tiny, freshly scratched screwhead on an overlooked vent cover.
He's actively hunting for the piece of data that breaks the existing story.
And the source material actually gives us the barrister's own explanation for why he succeeded where the official investigation failed. He says to Inspector Collins quite directly, "It's not about seeing, Inspector. It's about noticing what others choose to ignore."
Noticing what others choose to ignore. That's powerful.
It's practically a blueprint for effective analysis in almost any field, isn't it? Think about how you can apply that. Maybe in a business context, you read a report, 99% of the data looks positive, points towards success.
But the real insight might be in that one tiny anomaly.
Exactly. That one lagging indicator, that small deviation in a trend line that everyone else is dismissing, that's the faint scratch. That's the detail you need to notice because it might signal a fundamental problem nobody else is seeing yet. People just stop looking once they find a story that fits their expectations.
Like in risk analysis, a company might be totally focused on the big, obvious external threats, the metaphorical locked doors, competition, market changes,
while completely overlooking a subtle internal vulnerability, a tiny loophole in procedure, a weak point in security. The air vent that allows a Victor Kane, maybe an internal bad actor, or just a critical system failure to slip in and create a crisis. The most dangerous information is often the easiest to explain away.
Or even think about, say, medical diagnosis. A doctor sees symptoms, matches them to a common illness profile, the standard narrative.
But the truly great diagnostician notices the one unusual symptom, the one thing that doesn't quite fit the common picture, that scratch that contradicts the easy diagnosis, and points towards something rarer, maybe more serious, but ultimately the correct underlying condition.
It's the difference between seeing the patient's chart and really noticing the patient's unique data.
And the barrister drives this home with their other really profound quote, "Truth never hides. People just stop looking."
People just stop looking. Is that really true?
Well, in the context of this case, it absolutely was. The truth that Kane was in the room, staged the scene, and escaped using a clever trick wasn't buried miles deep. It was physically present.
In the vent scratches. In the impossible placement of the gun.
Yes. The evidence was accessible. It just wasn't actively sought out or given the right weight because the police had already mentally filed the case under suicide. They stopped looking for alternative explanations.
So for you listening, the real skill to master here is to constantly question the surface reality, especially when a conclusion seems neat, tidy, and overwhelmingly obvious.
That's precisely when you need to activate your skepticism. Actively look for the minor detail that doesn't fit. Ask yourself, what piece of information am I currently downplaying or ignoring just because it complicates the simple story I've already accepted?
The barrister shows us that the big breakthroughs often come not from uncovering deeply hidden secrets, but from finally giving proper intellectual weight to the contradictions that were hiding in plain sight all along.
It's about recognizing when the basic rules seem to have been broken, like a right-handed man shooting himself in the left temple and the gun landing on his right, and realizing that the evidence of that rule breaking is right there, available to anyone who decides to look without preconceived notions. #outro. So that brings our deep dive into the logic of the locked room to a close. We've journeyed into the seemingly impossible case of Samuel Grant's death.
Yeah, we followed the fugitive barrister's method step by step, from spotting that crucial handedness contradiction,
Through understanding the psychological clues pointing to duress, not despair.
to uncovering the killer's tools hidden away in that overlooked air vent.
And finally, painstakingly deconstructing that incredibly audacious wire and key mechanism used to lock the door from the outside while making it look sealed from within.
You know, the brilliance of Kane's plan was really in its layers, its complexity. But its downfall ultimately came down to just a few simple things he couldn't control or overlooked.
Those 4 key inconsistencies the police missed. The physical impossibility of the gun placement versus the wound and handedness. The clear motive and the external threats Eleanor mentioned. Those tiny, fresh scratches on the vent.
And, maybe the most overlooked part, the sheer difficulty and risk involved in that final step, getting the key precisely into the victim's pocket to sell the illusion. One slip there, and the whole thing unravels.
And as we wrap this up, maybe the final thought to leave you with is about Kane himself, his confidence, his meticulous planning, yet his ultimate failure. He built this incredibly elaborate puzzle box.
Convinced it was unsolvable. protected by the laws of physics, seemingly.
But as you said, he missed tiny details, maybe details he couldn't fully control, the exact way a body falls, the precise recoil of a specific gun, the exact tolerance between the door and the frame, forcing that risky pocket maneuver.
That whole complex structure rested on getting every single one of those small, uncontrollable variables perfect.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, if Kane had been just a little bit more careful, or maybe luckier, if he'd managed to stage the handedness correctly, maybe shot Grant in the right temple.
Or if he'd managed to drop the key less suspiciously.
Could that initial suicide verdict have actually stuck indefinitely? It's a slightly chilling thought. It highlights how the most complex plans are often the most fragile. They demand perfection, and perfection is rarely achievable, especially under pressure. The truth, as the barrister believed, is almost always there, waiting. You just have to decide to keep looking, especially after everyone else thinks the case is closed.
And with that thought, the case of the Fugitive Barrister is, at least for us today, closed. See you next time for another deep dive.